Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I've always loved hiking alone. There's something about the smell of damp leaves, the way the mist curls around the trees, and the way the forest seems to whisper secrets if you're quiet enough. So when I planned a 3-day backpacking trip in Shenandoah National Park, I expected peace, maybe a little adventure, but nothing that would make my skin crawl. I thought I knew what solitude meant. I was wrong. The first 2 days were exactly what I wanted. Crisp air, the rush of the creek over rocks, birds that seemed curious but never too close. I camped near a small clearing the third night, right beside a creek that murmured like it had something to tell me. I set up my tent, built a small fire, and let the crackle of flames mix with the rustle of leaves. The night was alive but calm. Then came the first sound that didn't belong. Around midnight, there was a faint crunch from the underbrush. I froze, listening. My flashlight cut a narrow circle into the darkness, and for a moment, I convinced myself it was a deer or maybe a raccoon. I tried to brush it off, pull my sleeping bag over my shoulders, and force sleep. But sleep didn't come easy. Around 2 a.m., I felt it, like icy fingers crawling over my skin. Something in the air shifted. My tent, which had felt cozy, now felt fragile, like a soap bubble about to pop. I unzipped the flap, flashlight ready, and peered into the darkness beyond the firelight. And then I saw him. At the edge of the tree line, just beyond the reach of the fire's glow, stood a man. He didn't move, didn't breathe, or at least I couldn't tell. His face was pale, almost glowing under the moonlight, and his eyes, God, his eyes, were fixed directly on me. I wanted to scream, but the sound never came. My throat locked up, frozen solid. I could feel my heart hammering, the blood rushing in my ears. I grabbed my phone. Luckily, I still had signal, and called 911. My hand shook so hard that I almost dropped it. The dispatcher's voice was calm, procedural, and utterly useless against the terror clutching me. "Police are on the way," she said. I nodded to myself, though no one could see me, and slowly turned back toward the trees, and he was gone. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing. It was as if he had never been there at all. I sat frozen for another hour, eyes darting across the shadows, every crunch of leaves making me flinch. By the first light of dawn, I packed up faster than I ever had in my life and left, glancing over my shoulder at every step. Back in a ranger station the next week, I told my story. The ranger raised an eyebrow, skeptical at first, then frowned. "You're not the first to see him," he said. He explained that there had been reports for years of a man living illegally in the park, hiding in the woods, watching campers. Nobody knew his name. Nobody knew his age. He never attacked anyone. He just watched. People called him the Watcher. Everyone who had seen him said the same thing. He loved being seen. I still think about that night. I still see his pale face in my mind. The way he stood perfectly still, like a statue carved from moonlight and shadow. And every time I go camping now, even in the daylight, I feel the weight of eyes from the trees, imagining him somewhere just beyond the edge of my vision, smiling quietly to himself. Sometimes I wonder, did he ever leave the park? Or is he still there, waiting for the next camper foolish enough to think the forest is empty, thinking they are alone. I'll never know. But I do know this. I'll never truly be alone in Shenandoah again. Not really. Not ever. Story 2. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who actually believes in the things people whisper about in forests at night. But after what happened to me in Olympic National Park, I can't think of the word camping without feeling my skin crawl. It was early fall, and the air was crisp, with fog so thick it clung to the trees like spider silk. I went with 2 friends, Mark and Tyler. We were looking for a quiet spot near a river to pitch our tents. The forest was beautiful, but there was this heaviness, like it was breathing around us. I brushed it off as my imagination. We set up camp just before sunset. I picked the tent closest to the river, thinking the sound of flowing water would be calming. Mark and Tyler laughed about it, saying I'd probably regret it. I didn't care. That night, I fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the hike. At around 1:30 a.m., I woke up. At first, I thought it was the wind rustling through the trees. But then I heard it, soft, groaning creaks like wood bending under pressure. My eyes snapped open, and I realized something was wrong. My tent, it was moving, slowly, almost lazily, sliding across the damp ground. The poles flexed like they were alive, and the fabric bulged in a way that made my stomach tighten. Something inside was pushing outward. I froze, heart hammering. The fog pressed against the tent walls, and I could just make out the outline of what seemed like a crouched shape. My throat went dry. Then instinct took over. I screamed. My voice tore through the night, and Mark and Tyler came running, flashlights swinging, faces pale. We rushed out. Nothing. No animal. No human. Nothing but the rustling of the river and the trees. Mark joked weakly. Probably a bear, but I knew better. There was no claw marks, no footprints, no evidence at all. Just the memory of that bulging tent and the sense of eyes. Watching. Smiling. We couldn't sleep after that. I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, some trick of the fog and the dark. But when I finally drifted off, I had nightmares of the forest bending around me, swallowing me whole. A few hours later, I woke again. My heart nearly stopped. A shadow crouched over me, impossibly still, like it had emerged from the fog itself. I could barely breathe. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but I saw the faintest curve where a smile should have been. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was patient, hungry, knowing. I scrambled out of the tent, tripping over roots and loose rocks, tearing across the forest floor without looking back. The air was sharp and wet in my lungs. I could hear Mark and Tyler yelling behind me, but all I could focus on was the shadow. Or maybe it was the thought of the shadow, because I never dared to glance back. I ran straight to the car, shaking so violently I could barely unlock the doors. Morning came slowly, reluctantly. The fog lifted, leaving the forest wet and silent. When we went back to look at the campsite, I froze. Deep grooves were carved into the earth around my tent, like claws, like someone or something had dug its fingers into the ground, circling it carefully, methodically. The tent itself was ripped in a few places, but otherwise, no other sign of what had been there. We reported it to the park rangers. They looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Then one of them leaned in, voice low, almost like he was warning me. That section of the forest, it's old. People go missing here. Strange sightings. You're lucky to be alive. I want to laugh it off, but I couldn't, because I knew what I had seen. That smile, the way it crouched there like it owned the night, like it had been waiting for me all along. I see it sometimes in my dreams, glowing faintly in the corner of my vision. I never went back. I can't. And sometimes, when I lie awake, I imagine the tent moving on its own, inch by inch, searching, waiting, smiling. I warn anyone who plans to camp at Olympic National Park. The rivers are beautiful. The fog is romantic, but some corners of the forest don't want visitors. They want witnesses. And if you see a tent moving on its own, don't approach. Don't look inside. Just leave. Because whatever was in mine, it's still out there. Watching, smiling, waiting for the next one. Story 3. I had always been drawn to solitude. Not the kind of solitude you get in your apartment, staring at the ceiling, but the kind that swallows you whole. The kind that makes the world vanish and leaves only the raw, beating heart of nature. That's why I decided to hike the north rim of the Grand Canyon alone. I wanted silence. I wanted emptiness. I wanted to feel something I couldn't anywhere else. The day was blistering hot, the kind of sun that seems to press your skin into your bones. I started early, backpack heavy with water, food, and camping gear. The trail twisted along sheer cliffs, carved into the rock millions of years ago. And as I climbed, the canyon stretched endlessly below me, every ridge and shadow deeper than the last. It was breathtaking, terrifying, alive. By late afternoon, I found a small ledge jutting from the cliffside, a perfect little plateau with just enough room for my tent and a sleeping bag. I set up camp, arranging my gear carefully, like a soldier preparing for nightfall. The sun sank behind the opposite rim, throwing the canyon into a mosaic of shadows. Silence followed, absolute silence, broken only by the wind whispering through the rocks. I tried to sleep early, lying on my back and staring at the sky. Stars crowded the heavens, shining too bright, too close. I drifted off, feeling the kind of peace you only get when you're alone and nothing in the world can touch you. Then came the whispers. I woke around midnight, heart hammering. At first, I thought it was the wind, playful and restless, teasing the canyon walls. But then I heard it, faint voices, not just the wind, whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I sat up, straining in the darkness, my flashlight shaking in my hand. Alex, my name, soft, gentle, but wrong. Wrong in a way that made my stomach knot. I flicked the beam across the ledge. Shadows danced on the rocks, long and thin, stretching like fingers. I thought I was imagining it. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe the canyon's vastness was bending my mind. But then I saw the footprints. Hundreds of them. Tiny, human-sized, circling my tent in patterns that made no sense. They hadn't been there when I arrived. I had been alone all day. I froze. The whispering grew louder, almost jubilant now, shifting into laughter that sliced through the night air. High-pitched, cruel, mocking laughter. It came from every direction at once, echoing through the canyon like the stones themselves were alive and laughing at me. I tried to leave. My legs wouldn't obey. Panic tightened around my chest like a vice. I told myself to stay calm, to rationalize, but the canyon had already decided I was part of its game. The laughter formed words I could almost understand, sentences that promised something I couldn't quite grasp. Then one of the whispers, closer now, spoke directly into my ear. "Come closer." I yelped and stumbled backward, tripping over my own pack. The flashlight skittered across the rocks, catching glimpses of shadows that moved faster than any human could. I grabbed my bag and tore down the ledge, ignoring the trail, ignoring the steep drop. My breath burned my lungs, my heart pounding louder than the wind. Every step echoed in my head. Every shadow seemed to follow. I didn't stop until I hit the main trail and kept running until dawn, the first light softening the canyon's edges into something less threatening, less alive. I didn't camp again that night. I drove to the nearest town and rented a cheap motel, shaking so hard I could barely write my name on the receipt. A week later, curiosity, or maybe stupidity, pulled me back. This time, I went with two rangers, professional and armed with radios. I showed them the ledge, the footprints, even the circling patterns I remembered in my mind. They looked at me with a kind of patient concern, the kind people reserve for those who've stared at something the world doesn't allow. Voices, one ranger said quietly, almost to himself. "We get calls about them all the time. Hikers report whispers, laughter, the sound of someone calling their name. Sometimes they follow it to the edge, and some never come back." The words sank in, cold and heavy. The canyon isn't just a hole in the earth. It's older than anything we understand. It has memory. It has hunger. And apparently, it remembers the names of those who wander too far into its silence. Even now, months later, I can hear it sometimes. Not the wind, not the noise of the city, not the television. Just a soft whisper, calling my name in a place where no one is. I tell myself it's my imagination, that it's fear or trauma. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I swear I hear the laughter too. And I remember the footprints. And I know that somewhere in the north rim of the Grand Canyon, the canyon is still waiting.